Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello and welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and today we are sitting down with Nathan Wood. Nathan is the founder and CEO of SpectrumAEC and the executive director of the Construction Progress Coalition, otherwise known as CPC. So Nathan's an expert in construction technology and has worked on over 100 project teams spanning the US, Europe, and the Middle East. These experiences have taught him when it comes to adopting technology in construction, it's not one size fits all. So his goal is to break down the human barriers in new processes and technology adoption and see contractors succeed like they've never been able to do before. Today, we're going to be talking about digitization, privacy, and efficiency. So hello, Nathan. Welcome on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
You bet. So when we talk about technology in construction, we have to talk about digitization. So what can you tell the listeners about digitization and what it is and isn't?
First and foremost, just that separation of what is data from what is technology. I think too often we lump those things together, but this term digitization is really the activity, the action that moves information from being analog, handwritten or printed out, to actually being digital. And so the more we can, whether you're a legal expert or in operations or anything in the digital age, the more information can be born digital and stay digital, the better off it is. But the more you lose that and it becomes an analog source, and then you have to recreate it back into digital, that duplication, that redundancy of entry, it not only creates waste, it also creates risk of data loss or data error. So those are really the shared pains that we're here to solve.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the term that you said. You said born digital. So tell us a little bit more about that and what the differences are. Something that's born versus not digitally.
Yeah, I think it goes all the way back to, is your contract at the very beginning, a smart contract that's digitally sealed and signed, and how much of a digital paper trail do you have across your entire project, I think is one of the major drivers for the digitization of this industry and really the need for it. I think that the McKinsey reports and all the stuff that you read about this lack of data is, it's the only thing we can shed light on. And I think the unfortunate thing is once we do see that data, we're probably not going to like what we're seeing either. And so it's sort of this two-edged sword of we're not getting the data we need. And then once we find it, how do we actually reckon with what that data is telling us?
Yeah, got it. So with that being said, what are some samples or examples that construction companies today have of both sets of that kind of data, both originated and also, I guess, converted?
Yeah, well, I think anything that's coming out of your ERP, your accounting system that is, you set up that PO, you set up that job number, that's kind of that born digital that you wanted to stay digital all the way through to completion. And too often those get printed out into paper tags and different things that lose that digital, sort of the native digital. And so I think really where we're facing the biggest challenge is not necessarily keeping things digital inside our companies, inside our company firewall, but that external exchange from the general contractor to the owner or the subcontractor to the general contractor, that's where we lose a lot of the data and why we end up with this duplication.
Got it. So I'm also imagining when you talk about data types that are born digitally versus otherwise, sounds like transferring something that was on a paper document or maybe a spreadsheet or somewhere where they're having to recreate or retype or regenerate is the disparity between the two. Is that right?
And that's where I look at digitization as actually a bad thing. It's the unnecessary effort that it takes to recreate something that is analog back into digital, whereas digitalization, add that extra AL in there, is that streamlining, that connectivity, that integration across the supply chain that starts to smooth things out, is kind of that next level. So we kind of look from digitization to that next level of digitalization is a lot of the early efforts and early successes that we're seeing in the industry today.
Yeah, and when you're saying this, it's making me think of, we just had James Benham, the CEO of JB Knowledge, on the podcast recently. And of course, he's a big proponent of these same approaches to technology and true solutions. And James talked about the older scanning solutions where we were digitizing paper, but all it was creating an image. And so he said that's a 90s solution to a 2021 problem.
And actually, to be really nerding out, what he's actually talking about, it's electronizing, like, because there's electronic is, that scan that I can see on my computer, but it doesn't actually have anything inherent to it. Making it digital has some level of inherent data, but again, that effort versus digitization versus digitalization, say that 10 times fast. But it's that barrier there that is really the rub. I think that the frustration that we're seeing with technology adoption, because I think we all see the potential, but there's this barrier of frustration in that we actually have to figure out the process change that enables this digitalization for us to have our cake and eat it too. And otherwise we get frustrated with the technology not working, when really it's not necessarily the technology's fault.
So with companies today, what would you say is the key to successfully going down this path that you're talking about of efficiency versus what they might be doing today?
Not looking to technology to solve the problems up front. I think it's like technology is a huge component in the solution, but it's the last step in that kind of three-step process of addressing the people and then addressing the process and then addressing the technology that best fits it. And I think depending on who you ask, whether it's an IT director or someone in the BIM and VDC kind of operations tech world, or a superintendent out in the field, you're going to get three very different answers as far as what they're looking for from technology. But I think that the solution, the digitalization, is when you can get all three of those folks to align on the same thing, and figure out, what that kind of magic sauce is to use technology to translate their needs, so that we can actually have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I like that. So what kind of an ROI can a company expect if they are able to leverage some of these in advanced functionalities that are available today?
So as a former project engineer and BIM engineer, I can say that the unfortunate truth is that what you're saving is additional hours that one of those poor young engineers would be doing, that is pretty much captured in their salary anyway. But like from a quality of life, from a what other things could they be working on, like there's so many intrinsic reasons. But usually when it comes to that ROI calculation, what my response is don't look at the return on investment, look at the revenue loss potential, RLP, and say, which is basically a hybrid calculation of how many hours are you spending unnecessarily doing things that could be automated with a little bit of investment in this integration, one, and then two, what risk are you posing yourself by having this person manually be doing this thing that could be automated through technology, so that you're actually better managing your quality of data and your quality assurance. So there's really two different reasons why, but it's almost like, tell me what your ROI is on your insurance policy. It's like, I can't tell you the ROI, but I know that I pay it.
Yeah, right.
And so I feel like the better you are with technology, the less you'll end up actually paying for it, because you'll pay less for services. You'll have more of that internal. You'll be able to leverage it more, and you'll figure out how to create it as a profit center, like a lot of those that in the industry are able to do. But I think it starts by recognizing that there's a big investment. There is a dip in that curve that you have to make, and sort of a trust fall, to get to that point where you're actually showing that it is a profit center and there is an ROI. But for a while, you have to almost treat the ROI calculation like an insurance policy.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I think that's it's very easy to visualize. So if you're comparing a large organization to a small organization, between the two of them, is the savings on that ROI, is it proportional to their company size, or do you see any differences between the two?
I mean, I think the larger the company is and the longer that they've had existing systems, I think it actually matters more, not necessarily how large they are, but how long they've been in existence and how long their legacy systems have kind of grown roots within the organization. Because I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing now are organizations that were very forward thinking 20 years ago and built systems when it was better to build it than it was to buy it. But now everything is software as a service and everything's in the cloud, and they're not quite ready to make that jump from on-prem to the cloud because they're so embedded in the way that they've always done it. So that I feel like there's a big dilemma with big companies on that front, which gives a great opportunity for the smaller guys that maybe never had something, was just Excel spreadsheets or other things, or were kind of kicking around different tools, gives them an opportunity to really search the market, pick the right tool, get themselves set up right, and scale right at the right time.
So another big topic in construction tech today is the discussion around privacy versus efficiency. So can you break down maybe what those issues are around privacy that you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the best way I actually describe that is almost like a top-down versus a bottom-up need. We were talking earlier about this need for data consistency and dashboards and wanting to see all the data in one place. And generally, those that want to see that are at the executive level or at the IT level or at the management level, whereas those that are actually creating the data, those that are digitizing and doing that digitization work, they're frustrated and they just want the tools that are most efficient for them. So it's really this, how do we bridge that gap between the most efficient tool for those in the field to capture and create data, and then also get that data to the same common source that IT or that executive, whoever wants it, from the top down. So really finding that midpoint, that translation between the top down data consistency needs and the bottom up efficiency needs. And so things like privacy, security, all those other aspects that are really top down challenges are always contrasted by, well, but that's only going to create less efficiency, and my job isn't to do this paper pushing, it's to be out building or to be out managing. So I think that's where that dilemma continues with technology. It's actually making something worse rather than fixing it.
Yeah, in some cases, I know when we hear, companies have concerns about adopting newer technologies, mobile technology, they'll say, well, yeah, you're making so-and-so's job easier, but now you're going to pile this on me, or now I've got one other process I've got to manage. And I think messaging that out to your staff and having not only a consistent message, but also overall buy-in from everyone that, look, we're going to give a little here, we're going to take a little there. In the end, generally, this is going to be better for the entire organization. So this is why we need to do it. It's about the team winning together, not any one person shouldering more or less than another, right?
And what makes that team is shared purpose. And having that alignment on a common why of why are we doing this in the first place. And I think that's where a lot of times I see, especially in the consulting side, leaders get tripped up in they want to see the dashboard, but yet they can't effectively communicate the measurements that they really want to see. And again, until they can define very clearly, what are those top 5 or 6 key performance indicators or critical success factors that you're measuring across projects that is going to define this is how your project's performance is measured. And we believe this to be a fair measurement across all projects, and that everyone's had that conversation and agreement of what that is. So too often technology gets rolled out and people are told that things are changing and they're not really told why. They're not given that full context. And it's either because it's not communicated to them or it was never actually determined in the first place. And yeah, that's really the order of operations is figure out what those measurements are, communicate them to the organization, and then deploy the changes. And I think the adoptions are much more likely to be successful.
Well, and I think, yeah, I love the way you phrase that. And I think one of the things that we've got to be more aware of as an industry is that we're by definition laggards in adoption of technology compared to other industries. We did a couple of years ago. We did a data report where we surveyed companies from all over the U.S., different industries, and basically the results came back and said that generally speaking, most companies are using 5 to 7 different apps to collect different data. So that's still a high number. It'd be better to be using less apps. Most of them are still using some form of paper or spreadsheets. They haven't gone fully digital. There's all these different findings, but generally speaking, we're finding that more companies are moving on board. The trend and the tide is turning. And so that really leads into something that I really wanted to talk about today, and that is this Construction Progress Coalition that you are heading up. What can you tell us about that and the mission there, and why you're doing your work that you're doing there?
Yeah, so the high level story going back to 2012, 2013 was actually prior to a Bluebeam Extreme conference. Sasha Reed, who was with Bluebeam at the time, and Kyle Hughes, who was with Skanska at the time, got together with about a dozen contractors to talk about this shared pain of, well, why is it that some PDF, which again was an open ISO standard at the time, export, why can't we use these files to more efficiently automate different processes like tagging and searching and hyperlinking that were new capabilities that were coming out from the technology. And we sort of had this big epiphany of, well, really, again, this wasn't how folks were using the Revit or AutoCAD or other design tools or how they're using Bluebeam. It was, or it wasn't the tools themselves. It was actually how they were using them and the process that they were using and the settings that they were using that was missing. And so what we were missing was this sort of guidelines around, if you just do these basic things, make sure these certain settings are turned on, of make sure you have a true type font so that we can search through and actually search the font rather than having to use optical character recognition, OCR, that makes it much less reliable for searchability and other things. Because anymore, you've seen some of these projects, they have 2,000, 3,000 drawings, and we have to be able to parse through that in an effective way. And so it was really the early stages of this need for data standards, data interoperability, and changing our process. And so the Construction Progress Coalition was born out of this PDF shared pain. So we dropped the name Construction PDF Coalition, picked up Construction Progress Coalition, and joined forces with the Construction Open Standards Alliance that I believe you guys may have been done some work way back in the day with the AGC XML efforts and some of those early. Is there a story to that?
We sure have. I have attended, in fact, for years. I attended meetings every month and regularly. We had 2 or 3 other team members, so we made sure that we were present and accounted for when that was going on. And we work with all the other major ERP vendors in the space, and they also were a part of that. And they were happy to see us involved and felt like it was important. We have a broad voice in the industry, and our experience is, from large to small organizations. So many integrations with all these different vendors. So it made sense for us to throw our hat in the ring and be a part of that.
And I think that's what's so interesting about this dual, combined story of these, shared pains at the industry side between architects, engineers, contractors, realizing if we just do these things certain ways within existing tools, we can make this work. While at the same time, technology players like eSub and Sage and SmartBid and you guys were all, kind of working on these AGC XML integrations. But I think the industry wasn't quite ready for you. They weren't quite understanding, it was a little too far ahead, but it set a really great framework. We still have on the website today those original AGC XML downloads. And the RFI CDX certification that we're starting to move forward with is still based on that fundamental framework. So anyone that did work based on that original stuff is actually ahead of the game. But it's just taken that long for industry and technology to really catch up. And now it's not XML standards, it's APIs. So we have to, understand what really is JSON, what are the capabilities of these different tools, and how do we bridge that language gap between what industry needs to communicate from requirements and what APIs can do from their end, so that, again, we can have that cake and eat it too, that I can use my preferred time tracking or daily report or whatever app, and that whatever system the GC requires and whatever system as a sub I require on my end, I can push one button and have that data go to the correct places all at once. And that we're getting close to that. We have sort of micro examples on the RFI and submittal level, thanks to these iPaaS integration platform as a solution type products like Rivet and Avocados and others that are doing this types of stuff. But it takes both new markets for who pays for this middle integration platform that we've never had to pay for before.
Right.
How do we trust the data? This whole privacy security issue. But at the end of the day, it is addressing the efficiency challenge. And so CPC as an organization, we're not a standards organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit that promotes and advocates for open interoperability standards. So groups like the XBRL, Extensible Business Reporting Language, that does a lot of work with CFMA and all of the surety organizations, NASBP, SFAA, trying to get them all together because they're obviously seeing the need for data and connectivity across all of their projects. But ultimately their data, a lot of it comes from contractors. So where can we, identify opportunities for sort of some shared gains where you could, the same data you're sending to the owner, you can also send to your surety and not have to, do that reporting twice. I think until we can start to find more of those win-win opportunities, it's going to be hard to find that ROI on some of these integrations. But the more we start searching, the more we realize like, oh, wow, there's some really big opportunities because as we all know, there's a ton of waste and soft cost in our supply chain that we can certainly cut out.
Well, it's like climbing a mountain. You're going from one bench to the next before you can get to the peak. And every time you get to the next part of that elevated area, your perspective changes and you're on higher ground. You're in a better position. And it just sounds like everything that you're advocating for is let's move this to higher ground. Let's get to a better place. And as you do that, your opportunity to improve and pick up other efficiencies is going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and in the adverse analogy, yeah, I feel like we've just gotten to base camp. We've just gotten out of the valley,
Yeah.
and we're like, okay, now we can actually see where we need to go. We have some vision here because for a while it was just kind of searching around for like, what is it that we really need to solve, and I think we now have a better understanding of what is missing in this disconnect between industry requirements and technology capabilities.
Yeah. Well, and I can think back to your point. I can think back to, I don't know how many years ago, 7 or 8, it seems like, speaking with James Benham, again, who's been a guest on this podcast, and Dennis Stakesco with Sage, who's also been a guest. And I know Benny Beltrowski at the time with ESUB. They were all a part of that COSA. I mean, we had the plaques on all our trade show tables, and, we're proud members of COSA. And my partners were asking me now what's this thing? And I said, it's probably early right now, but I still think it's important to have our voice be a part of this. And it may evolve and become something else. But I can tell you right now, if this is what James Benham is doing, it's probably a good thing that we should be looking at and also doing.
He is a visionary.
Yeah.
Got to give him that.
Right. So, but regardless of, the point, I guess, is that we have to be forward thinking in this technology space. We're trying to help construction get better. And the only way that's going to happen is if trailblazers like our organizations get out there early. I mean, we started on Palm Pilots. So we've been through the whole iterative history of PDAs all the way to smartphones and smart devices and tablets that we standardize on today. So interesting and fun to kind of have a flashback to the 80s, it feels like.
Right. Yeah. But you guys were the early kind of elevated state of thinking that, it is going to be open. It does need to have, these interoperability points. Because regardless of even if you ask me, even if one system were to own an entire organization and, let's just say Sage, for instance, fits every single tool for a company, they're still going to have to communicate that data to the owner that might be using, eBuilder or Project Ready or something else. And a trade contractor that might be using ESUB or Procore or anything else. And so that there's still going to be that need for external interoperability regardless, and that both industry and technology are opening their eyes to that. I think it's an important inflection point for the industry.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned Procore, and we're working on some things with them as well right now, and they're super proactive. In fact, we've got them coming on the podcast here this next week. We've got a couple of different guests from their team scheduled, and we're anxious to have those discussions as well. But earlier you mentioned CFMA, and I know that you have a survey that you've been working on with them as well. We're long-standing, almost from our inception, members of CFMA. We love CFMA. We've had Stuart Binstock on the podcast a couple of times already, and will again in the future. What's this survey that you're working on with them, and what can you share with us?
So I have to say and plug, listen to Stuart's interview, because I did listen, and the CIASP is also a collaboration partner with Construction Progress, and love everything that Cal and Stuart are doing on the mental health end of things. But on the CFMA end is around this shared pain of specifically WIP data reporting. And it's, again, in partnership with XBRL US. Michelle Savage over there has been amazing, and they have a whole about a dozen different surety partners that are very active about looking for ways to, again, combine better interoperability, solve those shared pains. So we're working to finalize and distribute a survey that will go out to all CFMA members around identifying, and really getting to think about, where do I currently share a lot of this, similar financial and WIP data to different parties, and what if I could just hit a button and send it to all of them? And probably a lot of folks that just hadn't even thought through that before. So hopefully the questionnaire, one, gets us some really interesting data and interesting insights on where the opportunities are, but two, just gets their brains thinking about how much duplicate data entry they're already creating, so that they're creating their own kind of mental ROI as we build the solutions that best meet those needs.
I love that. The market decides what solutions get created, because they're going to be asking for those solutions, and they're going to pay money for them. And when they are asking and they're paying money, then organizations like ours, we're going to listen, and we're going to develop those things that they need. So we do need to hear from the customers what their challenges are and how we can best solve them. And I think that's been happening for decades now, and we're in a really good place, but we want to keep going. So if you're listening to this, please plug in, do the research, learn about these organizations, and plug into not only within your own organization, but your networks. And if you're members of the AGC, I mean, we're big proponents of the AGC also. CFMA, we talked about the Construction Progress Coalition, CPC. So many great organizations to come and get involved with, to up your game in a digital age that we're all living in now. And when you say for better or for worse, I say it's certainly for the better. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And it's so great, since the early AGC XML group got together and was really kind of shocking the industry of like, wait, software would actually share data with each other, but aren't they competitors? And I think since then, Procore has been certainly a pioneer, and they've been an early member and support of ours. Autodesk, frankly, has, as much as they've been a mainstay in the industry, they really have pushed the industry towards subscription, towards cloud, better than a lot of the other platforms have been able to. But I think the real dark horse in all this is actually Newforma, with coming from the architect and engineering side, and the fact that they do control so much of that project, really important project management, the RFI and the submittal data. That's a really big pain point for the contractors and for the owners. And they hold a lot of it from the designer side. So the fact that I think all these different players are coming to the table, recognizing that we have to share this data and we have to be open with it to some level, but that the customer still has to decide from a privacy, from a security, what am I willing to share? What am I not willing to share? It makes the technology end of it much more complicated. But I think together we can find that middle ground that is not too burdensome on technology and is meeting that 80% need for the industry.
No, that's great. So is there a place that the listeners can participate in the CFMA survey still? Is that still available or open?
So it is actually to be sent out. So hopefully by this time, as this is being released, there'll be emails going out. It will be only for CFMA members. So if you are a CFMA member, keep an eye out for it. It's basically the XBRL contractor to surety CDX survey is the name that to take a look out for. But it's related to submitting WIP report data and those shared pains that are facing it. So keep an eye out if you are a CFMA member for that email to click on that survey.
That's fantastic. And I think many members of the CFMA are listeners, and many of our listeners are members. So works both ways. Appreciate your plugging that as well. That's exciting stuff. I'm glad to hear that's going on. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes so that they can click right from our show and plug into that survey.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome. So a couple things just to wrap up more on a personal level. So I've had a great conversation, learned a lot today, even personally, excited for everything that you continue to do and appreciate that good work. But on a personal level, if there was one skill that you've developed in your professional life, what would you say that is? And you would attribute it to it as your superpower?
Hopefully Sasha Reed's listening to this. I would have to say patience, which I am not a patient person at all. I am a self-admitted millennial that is very impatient with the change of this industry. But through my headbutting and getting knocked down a few times and getting back up, I think this combination of patience and persistence, patience and persistence has really paid off. Say that 10 times fast.
That's a good one, Nathan. I appreciate that. What about a business challenge that was difficult to overcome? What was it and how did you get through it?
Oh man, I think trying to stay to the defense of the IPD contract. I think there's a lot of animosity and sort of disdain for this new fancy, risky collaborative contract of integrated project delivery. And that's where I come from, that experience, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I would swear by IPD, but I think you have to be very careful with it and really understanding the importance of culture and leadership and how you use the system and not just rely upon the system to work for you. So yeah, the biggest, I think, business decision, and what I've found the more I work with folks at the CMAA and other organizations that are more on the construction management side, is I feel like IPD has gotten a very bad rap over the years. And so I always try and come to the defense of the target value delivery methodology and kind of the whole alternative thinking on systems level approaches to business models.
Love that. Well, for those nerds out there, they're going to love that answer.
Target value design. Yeah, I know. How many TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, can you fit in one answer?
Love it. All right. So the last thing, if there was one takeaway that you wanted to ask or hope that our listeners have at the end of listening to our discussion today, what would that be?
I think that deciding on technology platforms and making these decisions, whether it's one platform or many, is a decision that shouldn't be taken lightly, and that executives and leaders that may not be in a technology position do need to at least have a base knowledge and educate themselves enough on different perspectives. I think too often we found that executives leave the decision in the hands of one IT person or one BIM or VDC or innovation person. And too often you don't get that full spectrum of input and perspectives from those different stakeholders. And so the more you can make a broader decision when going into those technology decisions, and use methodologies like the choosing by advantages, CBA, another acronym for you. But I think that decision-making process and getting everyone involved in that is the biggest sort of advice that I've been giving out recently.
Love it. That's great, Nathan. Thank you so much. It's been a fun discussion, and I've appreciated having you on today. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thank you, Mike.
You bet. And thank you to the listeners today for joining us on the Mobile Workforce Podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation that Nathan and I had today, or were able to gain some helpful insights or intelligence that you can apply to your professional life, we ask you to please share that with your colleagues and coworkers, and also give us a 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform that you are listening to this episode. That feedback that you share with us is very valuable and helps us to continue to bring on great guests like Nathan and others. So again, thank you for your listenership. And our goal, as always, is not only to help you improve your business, but your life.